I don't remember falling. One minute I was standing at the counter, pouring myself a glass of water, and the next, darkness. When I opened my eyes again, the world was blurred, buzzing, smelling of bleach and plastic. I was on a hospital bed, wires stuck to my chest, the sound of a heart monitor clicking off the seconds like a metronome. I couldn't speak, not right away. My throat felt packed with sand. But I could hear them, 2 doctors, standing just to my side. One of them said, "We called his daughter." She picked up. But when we told her, she just said, "I'm busy." I thought maybe I'd misheard. My daughter, my only child. The one I'd raised alone after her mother passed. The girl I'd carried on my shoulders through county fairs, the one who used to beg me to braid her hair before school, and now, when I was lying there, unconscious, they had called her, and she had said, "I'm busy." That word cut deeper than any scalpel. It stayed in my chest, heavier than the 4 fluids dripping into my veins. I wanted to shout, to ask the doctors if they had pressed her, if they had told her I might not live through the night. But all I could do was blink at the ceiling tiles and let the truth settle in. And I'll tell you, boy, lying there, too weak to lift my own hand, I decided something. If I made it out of that hospital bed, if breath stayed in me long enough, I wouldn't let her betrayal pass quietly. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the slats of the blinds, but it didn't feel like morning. It felt like a reckoning. My body was stiff, my arms bruised where they'd shoved needles in, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I kept turning over that single phrase in my head, like a stone you can't stop worrying in your pocket, "I'm busy." The nurse came in with a clipboard and a smile too polite to be real. "Mr. Halpern, your vitals are looking better. You're a lucky man." I forced my voice through the gravel in my throat. Did my daughter call back? Her smile faltered just enough to give me the truth. "No, sir. Not yet. Not yet." I knew what that meant. Not today. Not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. She had made her choice, and I was no longer at the center of it. Lying there, I thought about the last time I'd seen her. She'd come by the house, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, glancing at her phone every other second. I'd asked her to stay for dinner, meatloaf, her favorite when she was a girl. She said she couldn't, that she had plans. I remember asking, "Bigger plans than eating with your father?" And she had just smiled that cold little smile, the one that says the conversation is already over. That memory hurt, but now it didn't make me sad, it made me angry. And anger, I realized, was better than sorrow. Anger had teeth. Anger could move a man who was too weak to sit up on his own. I pressed the button for the nurse again. When she came back in, I asked for a phone. "Family you'd like to call?" she asked gently. "Something like that," I said. What I didn't tell her was that I wasn't calling for comfort. No, I was calling to set something in motion. Something my daughter wouldn't see coming. The phone was heavier than I remembered. My hands trembled as I held it, but not from weakness, no, it was the weight of what I was about to do. I didn't call my daughter. I already knew how that would go, a sigh, a pause, then her saying she'd get back to me. She wouldn't. She never did. Instead, I scrolled through the old numbers I hadn't touched in years until I found one, Martin Wade. Martin and I hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, not since our falling out over a loan he never repaid. But Martin was still family, in a way, my late wife's cousin. And unlike my daughter, Martin had always been loyal to a fault when it came to blood. He picked up on the third ring. "Halpern? You alive?" His voice carried that gravelly laugh, like he was already half amused by the fact I was still breathing. "Alive enough," I said. "Listen, Martin. I need a favor. A big one." There was a pause. "Depends on the favor." I leaned back against the pillow, my chest rising with shallow breaths. "My daughter, she left me in this hospital bed to rot. Doctors called her, and she said she was too busy. Too busy. Can you believe that? I can, he said flatly. I've seen the way she talks to you. She thinks she's better than the old man who raised her. His words burned, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I want her to learn, I said slowly, choosing each word like a stone in a wall. I want her to understand what it means to abandon someone who would have given his life for her. Another pause on the line. Then a low whistle. You're talking about revenge. I let the silence confirm it. Martin laughed again, softer this time. All right. Tell me what you're thinking. And right there, in that white hospital bed, with machines humming around me, I began laying out a plan, not for reconciliation, not for forgiveness, but for something far colder. Because if my daughter didn't have time for her father's last breath, then I was going to make damn sure she had nothing but time to think about it afterward. They discharged me 3 days later. The doctors told me to rest, to take it slow, but rest was the last thing on my mind. My body still ached, every step felt like I was walking with sandbags tied to my legs, yet the anger kept me upright. Anger will do that, it'll keep an old man moving when reason says he ought to sit. Martin picked me up in his dented pickup, the same truck he'd been driving back when my wife was alive. He leaned over the seat with that crooked grin. You don't look dead yet. Shame for her, huh? I didn't answer. I just climbed in, clutching the hospital folder like it was a shield. Inside were my discharge papers, a prescription list, and one sheet I'd asked the nurse to print for me, a copy of the hospital's call log. It showed the exact time they'd phoned my daughter, the note beside it, patient's daughter responded, I'm busy. I read it until the words blurred. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into my coat pocket. Proof. Cold and clean. At home, the house smelled the same, dust and wood polish, the faint scent of pipe tobacco lingering in the curtains. But I saw it differently now. Every framed photo of her, every birthday card she'd once scrawled her name across, all of it looked like evidence. Evidence of how far we'd fallen. Martin sat at the kitchen table, waiting for me to speak. Finally, I said, she wants my money. That's the only time she comes around anymore, circling like a vulture. Well, we'll give her something to circle. His eyes lit up. You want to bait her? I nodded. But not with money. With something she thinks is more important. What's that? I leaned forward, my voice dropping low. My health. My will. Let her believe the clock is ticking faster than it is. Let her scramble, thinking she's got one last chance to cash in. Martin grinned wide. And when she takes the bait? I sat back, breathing slow, feeling the plan taking shape in my chest stronger than any heartbeat. Then she'll learn exactly what being too busy for her father costs. Martin and I spent that whole night at my kitchen table, the two of us hunched over like a pair of schemers in some backroom poker game. I hadn't touched alcohol in months, but I poured us both a glass of whiskey. My doctor would have had a fit, but hell, this wasn't about medicine anymore. It was about clarity. She's not going to just walk in because you ask, Martin said, his glass catching the yellow glow of the kitchen light. You've got to make her believe she's missing something if she doesn't. He was right. My daughter had grown into the kind of person who only appeared where there was leverage. When she was little, she'd come running at the sound of an ice cream truck. Now, she came running at the sound of a dollar sign. So I made the first move. I called her. My hand trembled a little as the phone rang, but I didn't let it show in my voice. When she picked up, I could hear the background noise, voices, clinking glasses, the sound of a party I wasn't invited to. Dad, she said, clipped and impatient, like she'd answered a telemarketer. I coughed lightly, letting my voice rasp. It's me. I just got out of the hospital. A pause. Then, I heard. The doctor called me. They said you were busy. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear her squirm. I was. I'm sorry, Dad, I was in the middle of something important. I let the silence hang. Then, very slowly, I said, the doctors think I don't have much time left. They want me to get my affairs in order. That landed. I heard it in her breathing, the sudden quickness, the shift from annoyance to calculation. Dad, don't talk like that, she said, her tone softening, sugar coating laced over steel. You're strong. You'll be fine. I've already called the lawyer, I lied. He wants me to decide how everything gets divided. Now she was fully hooked. Her voice sharpened with forced concern. Divided? You mean your estate? Yes, I said flatly. The house, the savings. All of it. I'm deciding soon. The line went dead quiet, and for a second I thought she'd hung up. Then she spoke, and her voice was suddenly full of warmth, the kind of warmth I hadn't heard since she was a child. Dad, maybe I should come by tomorrow. We can talk about things, you know, just the two of us. It's been too long. Too long. My lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. I looked across the table at Martin, who raised his glass in a silent toast. Tomorrow, then, I said, and hung up before she could say another word. The next day, I didn't bother with meatloaf or setting the table. I wanted her to walk into that house and see it for what it was, lived in, worn, fragile like its owner. I left the hospital bracelet still on my wrist. I let the medicine bottles sit on the counter where she couldn't miss them. I looked the part of a man on the edge, because that's exactly what I wanted her to believe. When the knock came, it wasn't tentative. It was sharp, purposeful, like someone who already believed they had a right to enter. I opened the door, and there she stood, my daughter, in a tailored coat that cost more than my month's pension, a leather purse slung over her shoulder like a badge of victory. Dad, she said, and for the first time in years she leaned forward to kiss my cheek. Her lips were cold. You look well, I lied. And you look tired, she said, giving the place a slow scan. Her eyes landed on the stack of envelopes on the kitchen counter, bills, hospital paperwork, my so-called affairs. Her gaze lingered just long enough for me to see the wheels turning. We sat at the table, the same table where Martin and I had plotted the night before. I poured her coffee, black, the way her mother used to drink it. She didn't touch it. I'm glad you came, I said. It means a lot. She reached across the table, put her hand over mine. Of course I came, Dad. You're my father. I'd do anything for you. Her words stung, not because I believed them, but because once upon a time I had. I leaned back, studying her face, the fine lines around her eyes, the practiced expression of concern. She thought she was playing me, but she didn't realize the game had already started. Anything? I asked softly. She smiled, calm, confident, rehearsed. Anything. And that was the moment I knew she was already trapped. She stayed longer than I expected. That, in itself, told me everything. My daughter had never been one to linger, her visits in the past had been 15 minutes at most, always ending with her tapping her watch or glancing at her phone. But now she sat there, posture perfect, pretending to listen as I spoke about my health, my medications, the quiet days since the hospital. Her eyes kept straying, not to me, but to the piles of paperwork I'd left deliberately scattered across the counter. Bank envelopes. Letters from the lawyer I hadn't opened. A printed balance statement, the numbers circled in pen. I had planted it all like breadcrumbs. Finally, she asked, as casually as someone asking about the weather, "So, Dad, you said you've spoken to your lawyer already? About arrangements?" I sipped my coffee, watching her over the rim. Yes. He told me I should name beneficiaries soon. Before it's too late. Her expression softened into that mix of pity and hope she'd perfected over the years. Well, you know you don't have to worry about that with me. I'll always take care of things for you. Will you? I asked, leaning forward just enough for her to feel the weight of the question. She blinked, faltered, then recovered with a smile. Of course. You're my father. Family takes care of family. Martin's words from the night before echoed in my head. She thinks she's better than you. She thinks you're just a wallet with legs. And now, sitting across from her, I realized just how right he was. I let a long silence stretch, the kind that makes people fill it with more than they mean to say. She shifted in her chair, tapped her manicured nails against her cup, and finally leaned in. Dad, she said softly, have you written anything down yet? You know, about who gets what. There it was. Naked, at last. No pretense, no concern, just the hunger she could no longer keep buried. I lowered my voice, as if confessing something private. Not yet. But I'm thinking tomorrow might be the day. Her eyes flickered, a spark she tried to hide but couldn't. Tomorrow. That single word was enough to set the clock ticking in her head. I reached for her hand across the table, held it tight. But I want to make sure I leave things in the right hands. In the hands of someone who'll remember me. She squeezed back, smiling sweetly, but her eyes betrayed her. She wasn't thinking about remembering me, she was thinking about what she could take once I was gone. And as I sat there, feeling her cold fingers wrapped around mine, I knew she had already fallen into the trap. She just didn't know how deep it went. Because tomorrow, when she came back expecting to hear my final decisions, she wouldn't be walking into an old man's confession. She'd be walking into a reckoning. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face across the table, smiling that thin smile while her eyes counted the papers on my counter. She thought tomorrow would be simple. She thought she'd walk in, play the doting daughter for an hour, and walk away with the certainty that her name was written on everything I owned. But I wasn't about to let her write the final chapter of my life. I rose before dawn, my joints creaking as I moved through the house. The first thing I did was clear the counters, every bank statement, every letter, every scrap of bait I'd left for her. Then I pulled out the old lockbox from the back of the closet, the one that hadn't been opened since her mother passed. Inside were photos, some jewelry, and one thing I had never shown her, the old family deed to the house, folded and yellow with age. Worthless as paper, priceless as a symbol. Martin arrived around 8, carrying a paper bag that smelled like fried potatoes. He dropped it on the table and sat, watching me fuss with the box. You ready for this? I've been ready since the hospital, I said. He grinned. Then let's tighten the rope. The plan was simple, let her believe she was about to secure her inheritance, then show her just how far I was willing to go to make her face what she'd done. By mid-afternoon, the house was staged. The lockbox sat in the middle of the table like a prize, its contents just visible enough to spark questions. My will, an actual draft I'd scribbled the night before, was tucked inside, written in my careful block letters. But where she expected to see her name alone, she'd see something else entirely. The knock came right on time, sharp and expectant. She stepped in without waiting for me to answer, her perfume trailing behind her like a flag planted on conquered ground. Dad, she said warmly, how are you feeling today? Better, I said, forcing my voice weak, brittle. Come, sit. Her eyes went straight to the lockbox. What's that? I pushed it toward her. Everything that matters. I wanted you to see it before I make anything official. She leaned forward, her hands almost trembling as she flipped the lid. I watched her scan the photos, the jewelry, and finally, the folded will. Her lips parted just slightly as she unfolded the paper, her eyes darting across the words. Then she froze. Because the will didn't name her. It named Martin. Her head jerked up. What is this? Martin leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee like it was a Sunday morning. Looks pretty clear to me, he said. She snapped, her polished mask cracking for the first time. "Dad, this has to be a mistake. You can't leave everything to him. He's not your child." I kept my eyes steady on hers. "And what are you, exactly?" The daughter who was too busy to answer the call when her father was lying in a hospital bed? Her face flushed red, her voice rising. "That's not fair. I had responsibilities. More important than your own father's life." I cut in, my voice sharper than it had been in years. For the first time since she walked in, she had no answer. She looked from me to Martin, then back to the paper in her hands, her composure slipping with every second. And I sat there, watching, knowing the lesson had only just begun. The silence in that room was heavy. My daughter stared at the will as though the words themselves had betrayed her. Her perfectly painted nails dug into the paper, crumpling the edges, and for a moment I thought she might rip it in two. This isn't right," she muttered, her voice trembling, the sweetness gone. "I'm your daughter. I've earned this." I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "Earned it? Tell me how, child. By leaving me in an empty house year after year? By answering the hospital's call with 'I'm busy'? By treating me like a burden instead of a father?" Her eyes flicked toward Martin, who sat there grinning, loving every second. She wanted to lash out at him, I could see it, but she knew this was between her and me. "You don't understand," she finally snapped. "I have a life. A career. People depend on me. And I didn't depend on you." My voice cracked, not from weakness, but from the raw truth. "All I wanted was for you to show up. 1 hour. 1 minute. Just to prove that I mattered more than whatever meeting or party you had. But you couldn't even give me that." She pushed back from the table, pacing the kitchen like a cornered animal. "This is insane. You'd rather leave everything to him?" She jabbed a finger at Martin. "Martin may not be my blood," I said slowly, "but he showed up when it mattered. That counts for more than DNA." Her jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw fear in her eyes, not fear of losing me, but fear of losing the things she thought she was entitled to. The mask was gone now, replaced by raw desperation. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking into a plea, "please. Don't do this. You don't mean it. You're just angry. I can do better, I will do better." I let the words hang in the air. For a second, I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered the voice of that nurse, calm and professional, repeating my daughter's exact words while I lay unconscious. "She said she's busy." I shook my head. "You've had years to do better. You chose not to." She collapsed into the chair across from me, clutching the will in her hands as if she could squeeze herself back into it by force. Her lips trembled, and she whispered, "So this is it? You're just cutting me out." I leaned in, close enough for her to feel the weight of every syllable. "No. This is me showing you what it feels like to be unwanted. To be pushed aside. To be left alone when you need someone the most. Now you'll carry that weight, the same way I carried yours." Her eyes widened, glistening, not with grief, but with rage. And I knew, in that instant, that the next move would come not from me, but from her. She wasn't beaten yet. And when she fought back, it would tell me everything about who she truly was. Her hands trembled as she folded the will back into the lockbox, too tightly, like she thought she could shove herself back into its words by force. Then she looked at me, her eyes sharp now, no more pleading, no more sugar. That mask of the dutiful daughter had shattered, and in its place was something colder, truer. "You think this hurts me?" she said, her voice tight, clipped. "You think writing my name out of some stupid piece of paper changes anything? You can't erase me, Dad. You're old, you're weak. You need me whether you like it or not." I didn't flinch. I'd expected the venom. I even welcomed it. "You had your chance to be needed," I said evenly. You let it slip away. She slammed her palm on the table, rattling the lockbox. Don't you dare talk to me like that. I sacrificed everything for the life I built. Do you think it was easy climbing to where I am? I didn't have time to babysit an old man living in a crumbling house. Martin chuckled under his breath, and that only fueled her rage. She spun toward him. And you, what, you think you've won something? You've leeched off this family for years. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. He leaned back in his chair, unbothered, and said with a smirk, nothing still showed up when he needed me. Her face flushed scarlet, and I saw the veins in her neck stand out. She was losing control. You don't get it, do you, Dad? She hissed, turning back to me. You've already given me everything. My education, my head start, my name. You can scribble whatever you want in your little will, but in the end, you owe me. I earned this life because of what you gave me, and I'm not letting you take it back. I stared at her, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. She didn't even hear herself. In her mind, it wasn't about love, or duty, or family. It was about ownership. Entitlement. And right then, I knew she wasn't going to walk away quietly. No, she was going to fight, to claw, to manipulate, until she got what she thought belonged to her. But that was fine. I wanted her desperate. I wanted her raw. Because when people are desperate, they reveal themselves fully. So I leaned back, folded my arms, and said calmly, then prove it. Prove you deserve a place in this house, in my will, in my life. Tomorrow night. Be here at 7. No excuses. Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across her face. And if I don't? Then Martin inherits everything, I said flatly. For a moment she stood frozen, torn between pride and greed. Then she lifted her chin, forcing herself back into composure. Fine. Tomorrow night. 7. She grabbed her purse, stormed out without another word, the door slamming behind her so hard the windows rattled. Martin looked at me, eyebrows raised. What's tomorrow night? I poured myself another glass of whiskey, my hand steady now. Tomorrow night, I said, is when she learns there are some debts you can never repay. The next evening, the house was quiet enough to hear the clock tick in the hallway. I'd set the table with just 2 plates, though I hadn't cooked a thing. It wasn't food she was coming for, it was her future, or so she thought. 7 o'clock sharp, the knock came. Softer than before. Cautious. When I opened the door, she was dressed to impress, black dress, pearls, her hair pulled tight. She was dressed not for me, but for the performance she thought she had to give. Dad, she said sweetly, stepping inside. I'm here, just like you asked. I nodded, motioned her to sit. The lockbox was on the table again, but this time, the will was gone. In its place was a single envelope, sealed. What's that? She asked, eyeing it like a cat watches a mouse. That, I said, is the decision. My decision. I told the lawyer it would be ready tonight. Her fingers twitched, but she held herself back. So, what do you want from me? I leaned forward, my eyes steady on hers. I want you to tell me why. Why you didn't come when the hospital called. Why you said you were too busy. Her face flickered, first surprise, then irritation. Dad, I told you. I had obligations. People were depending on me. I cut her off. And I wasn't worth depending on. The sweetness dropped from her face, just like that. You don't get it. I worked too hard to get where I am. If I dropped everything every time you needed something. Every time. I snapped. It was once. Once. When I might have been dying. Silence. Just the clock ticking. She looked away first. And that told me everything. I slid the envelope across the table. Take it. Her hand darted out, greedy, trembling with anticipation. She tore it open, unfolded the paper, and read. Her face paled. Then flushed red. Because it wasn't a will. It was a copy of the hospital call log, the one that read, "Patient's daughter responded, I'm busy." She looked up at me, shaking. "What is this?" "That," I said softly, "is all you'll inherit from me." Her lips parted, but no words came. Rage and humiliation twisted her features, and for the first time in years, she looked small to me, small and powerless. She stood, the chair scraping the floor, the paper crumpled in her fist. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "No," I said, standing too, steady despite the ache in my bones. "You will. Every time you remember the night you thought you'd come here to claim what was mine, and instead I handed you proof of what you really are." Her eyes burned, but she said nothing more. She stormed out, the door slamming one last time. The house was quiet again. Martin came out from the kitchen, shaking his head, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Cold, Halpern. Real cold." I poured myself a drink, my hand steady. No colder than she was. We sat in silence after that, the weight of the evening settling like dust. I knew she'd never forgive me. I also knew she'd never forget. And that, son, was the point. Because revenge isn't about making them suffer for a night. It's about making sure they carry the wound forever.